3 acres, then I've been able to significantly reduce my costs per unit.
But there's no restriction now on, I mean, there's ordinance, there's allowance for multifamilies, 2-family dwellings, boarding house, group houses. You know, it's not like the ordinance doesn't address those things, or, you know, have a way to address them, as Paula said sort of earlier. You know, it's more like what is prohibiting anything. I think the real challenge for Readfield is creating the growth in the right areas and somehow incentivizing that. I think that's the probably number one priority, because all the goals are aspirational, all the things seem to be sort of correct with the things we discussed tonight that could perhaps be improved, but we still haven't addressed the, you know, how do you get it to happen?
Right.
And perhaps worth talking to communities that have done that. I don't know.
Matt, I think the answer to this is no, but are you aware of any communities that may have done anything remotely akin to Don's fee structure idea?
I'm not aware of a community that's done something the way Don has described it, but I'm really interested to investigate that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've traditionally relied on things more akin to, you know, just sort of your straight up tax increment financing districts and those sorts of things, which are possible out here in Readfield. You could do an affordable housing TIF that ends up paying for the sewer system for an affordable housing project, and say that we're only going to do those TIFs in the growth area. That would incentivize growth in the growth area potentially. Would make it cheaper for a developer to do those projects. But Don's idea of essentially figuring out a way to create a fund that would allow individuals to develop in the growth area through an impact fee, I'm not quite sure. I'm definitely going to be looking at that. I don't know of any other communities that's done. There's nothing that stands out in my mind on a community that's done something like that.
Don is known for thinking outside the box.
Yeah. As long as we stay inside the constitutional box, we'll be good.
Yeah. Well, that's not the concern.
So I'm definitely gonna look into that. I like the idea for my day job. I'll look into that for my day job issue.
I'm curious what George thinks, since he's a realtor, that how to encourage growth in designated areas.
Well, I personally, I like the 2 acre, 200 feet of road frontage limits for just keep maintaining the rural character right now, currently. But as far as within the village district, it would be a matter, I think, of allowing maybe more right of ways to access the land that's within the village district, but it doesn't have much road frontage. So that, I think that's one hurdle that isn't that difficult, I don't think, to overcome. But and then obviously the sewer, that's a big hurdle, but that would encourage a lot more commercial growth for sure, in my opinion.
Matt, I just took a look at the city of Portland to see how they do it, because they have impact fees in Portland. I was just curious. They actually do have it set up a little bit like that. They have an impact fee. They have an impact fee account. So they charge impact fees. They put an impact fee account together, and then this account is designated for funding funding for improvements, for municipal improvements for which the fees are collected as determined through the city's most recent impact fee study. They will be distributed to the city departments solely for the purpose of capital projects identified in the city of Portland's most recent study. So the
Yes,
city does a study, right? And they use the fees which they collect through their building application permits. Then they reallocate, that's a separate account, and they reallocate those fees for things that they vote on, I guess.
right. That's a very traditional impact fee structure. And so a lot of communities have those. I'm curious as to whether or not Don's idea of being able to use those fees to assist private individuals with the development of their parcels in growth areas is possible. I'm not sure. You certainly can use them to develop public infrastructure. That's very common.
Yeah, it doesn't specifically only limit it to municipalities. So that's a legal question, but I would imagine that it's a good question, but it's certainly a way to create a, may discourage growth in particular areas, probably not as much as you think, but certainly in areas where that did occur, it would at least create some funding beyond the property tax revenue in order to potentially encourage other things. And in worst case scenario, we might consider it anyway, because it would still allow for the town to further develop some of that infrastructure, as I was mentioning earlier.
Absolutely.
And perhaps it's more for particular districts, etc. Clearly varies enormously by what you're building or what it is, where it is, those kinds of things.
Yeah, type of impact fee as well, and exactly what that impact fee is for.
I mean, I kind of like that concept for Readfield, because I think that's something that would perhaps, I mean, sounds like you're charging more money, but I think it does allow for a different funding mechanism in order to move some of the goals forward rather than just rely on the property tax revenue and state revenue.
Okay, what else? Matt, did you have other issues you wanted to put on the table, or have we?
I don't at this point. I don't. Unless there's some burning issue that that board members have.
I just wanted to inquire, because it references the 3 growth zones and it includes academic, and there was discussion in the academic, which seemed to be zeroing in on and I know we had the issue come up about certain property in the academic district that was not allowed to be sold for non-academic purposes. But I couldn't figure out if that was the extent of it, because there was some reference to underutilized housing stock, which I assume that's Kent's Hill. But I was just left a little confused by the comp plan going into that. But anyway, maybe someone can shed some light on that.
Well, I think the thought, and I don't recall that the comp plan committee spent much time talking about it. I think that what appears in this draft came from the KB COG planner. And I think she identified that as a possible area to look at. And actually, Jack, you had mentioned this to me the other day when we talked about taking a look at the academic district generally, and what's it good for anyway, and should we do something else with it? And I think that's a conversation that we could have and probably should have if there are questions around it. My recollection is that the academic district was created to accommodate the existing school properties, and that we didn't want to see a lot of additional commercial activity in those districts, and that the use should be dedicated principally to academic purposes. I don't think we ever had a specific example of where that was a problem, but I think in theory, people were expecting that, commercial development could collide with the academic use of the property and make it an undesirable situation. But beyond that, I don't recall if there was other discussion about the use of the district and the purpose for its existence.
By the way, the draft comp plan says that the academic district is missing from the list of land use districts, but it is there.
Yeah, I don't think it's missing. Yeah.
Third column.
But it's defined on page 36, along with all the other districts.
Yep.
And it's in the land use tables too.
And that's the only thing, Paul, it is, that was, I was not around when that initially was created. I think that was probably the 1993 comp plan or something earlier than when I moved to Readfield, because the academic district existed when I was on the planning board. My suspicion is that it was a way for whoever wrote that section of the plan and that section of the ordinance to be able to allow a relatively large, intense use without concern about it expanding into something else, or allowing other large, intense uses in the same locations. Being very specific about the type of use you want in that area. It's not necessarily uncommon. We've got a couple of districts that are equally tight in the city that are government districts.
So it's mentioned here that there's some idea about if, for example, Kents Hill School had unused dorms and they wanted to rent them out to local people, would that be allowed? Is that the idea, that to loosen up on the academic district so that they can be used more easily?
That's certainly the part of the draft comprehensive plan. That is the intent of that section, is to generate some conversation around that issue. Yes. And that was something I believe that was raised by Kents Hill in one of our comp plan committee meetings. I remember right.
And so in Kents Hill, that on Route 17, the private homes that are there, are they in the academic district, or are they in village district or something like that? Or is it just land owned by the school that's the academic district, or does it affect other pieces of property?
So
I assume it's just the land owned by the school.
Yeah, I think it was intended to encompass land that was owned by the school, whatever the school was.
I think it does encompass more than just land owned by the school, though. There are some private residences that are in the academic district up there, I believe.
most of the residences across the street towards the lake are in a residential district. Academic district is primarily the campus of Kents Hill School. And then over by the ski slope, there's quite a bit of open space land, forested land that's zoned academic.
So the houses across the street are all in they're in a residential
Yeah,
district,
yeah,
not in the academic district.
not in the,
Okay. Right.
and most of those have just changed hands this year.
Why is that?
Been sold,
Understood.
People moving.
older people moving out.
Yeah, it talks specifically in the current land use ordinance about specifically and uses words educational institution focused exclusively on the institution's development needs and excluding, specifically excluding unrelated residential, commercial, and industrial uses. So if it's within the current academic district, its entire purpose is to focus on the academic use. So therefore, I would read that as dormitories or dorms, not to be used for residential, repurposed within that district. So that there's a conflict there probably in that philosophy that needs to be probably worked out if that's something the community wanted to explore as an example.
If I may. If I
Yes,
may, hate to. Yeah. There has been talk, there's been more than talk, Kents Hill is hurting for volumes of students. Most of their overseas students have been taken away. They're slowly coming back, but very slowly. I believe the issue, talking to the people in the lands up there, might have been that they're looking for extra venues for income. And so, for example, in the summertime, they have some athletic camps there, but most of those dormitories are wide open. It would be perfect for families that are coming up, either with their kids, they could house them in a money-making fashion to be with their kids and enjoy the water space around here. And there's also the different camps that are around here that are always, have a need for, adults that come up to be with their kids when there's no COVID. So I believe it's a model that they were looking at to survive, a survivability type thing. And it might not be such a bad thing. Keep an open mind towards something like that. The use of short-term rentals, a giant B&B, Airbnb, to allow them income source to maintain, a valuable resource here in town. And also offer, housing for people have kids in camps around here, keeping them in town and visiting our local resources. Quite honestly, I heard somebody mention about the Cornerstone area and saying that that's become a, residential. It only became residential because they couldn't get enough business in there. That's a real problem here. We can have businesses, as we're starting to see down at the depot, but they need traffic, they need people. And keeping your mind open to something like Kents Hill might be interested in might benefit more than one area of the, the comp plan. And I'll be quiet.
So I do think that whole topic of the academic district is, will be on the table for discussion. And I think there are a number of people who are interested in talking about it. And we do have a representative from Kents Hill School on the committee too. So I would assume that they would bring, those perspectives from the school administration if it's something that they want to pursue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think just Chip, but just, conceptually, I don't think if it's no different than what like Colby College does, right? If they have a camp, a summer camp or something going on at the school, they quite often, and I'm sure Kents Hill could do this, is house those students, house their families, parents, referees, whatever other components of that, or maybe for the summer even. So those are to me, that's consistent with the current thought process of what it would be.
Say that same thing. I think that's consistent with the goals of the district. So, I don't really see there's a conflict, but maybe we do need to look at the wording in the LUO, and maybe there needs to be some listening up there.
I agree, Don. I think that's not currently, which again, very open-minded, Chip, too, and Paula, but I do think though that the current ordinance does sort of imply some restriction related to, let's say, if they were to more permanently repurpose some of their housing or some of their other designated buildings for other purposes other than academically, minded.
I mean, if they wanted to lease one of their buildings to, I don't know, to some corporate entity,
right,
doing God knows what, that's what this zoning scheme would prohibit.
There you go.
Okay, well,
Was-
go ahead.
Well, There was this issue that came up when we did the disc golf on the South Road, that one side of the road is zone village and one is village residential. So you could, I think you could have like a gas station on South Road. I don't know if that was the intention
Huh,
of when that happened.
I'm not,
So the
I'm not
left side of the
remembering.
road is open to commercial development, but the right side isn't. And I don't know if that was really ever intended.
It's village development right up until the school. It's its own village. Yep.
But it's only on one side of the road, right?
Right, it is on both sides of the road as you start up the hill, but once you get up the steep spot, it's only on one side.
Yeah.
Once you get past Bob White's old place.
And I don't know whether we want commercial development on South Road.
Well, it only goes right to the school.
Right.
It stops there.
But there was an uproar there when they wanted disc golf. And they should have, at the time, I think, amended the land use table. I mean, the land use maps to eliminate village district from that road. Anyway, what do you think, Jan?
But there's already commercial there.
A feeling that was coming to me. There's another business, right? That it's for sale now, right? But it was right on the corner. That salt box on the right as you turn on.
Yeah, Bob White's building.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a business as well. I mean, yeah. I would personally be anti-development on South Road. I do see on the map though where it looks like it goes right past the school. Or sort of right up to the, what would that be? The border of the school property, right across.
Through, yeah, through the school, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really seem to me like the character there, and I know the disc golf place is compatible with that area. I think.
Well, the disc golf place is no longer there, so that.
Right, not anymore. Although I think the little basket was still there for a long time.
But the business is no longer there.
After all that, and it doesn't exist anymore.
But you could have a gas station on South Road.
Yeah, that'd be terrible.
I don't think it's what was intended.
Well, I think that there are various points in time when we make changes to the maps, the zoning maps and so forth, and it doesn't take a piece in the comp plan to trigger that. I mean, that's something we could do anytime if there are things that if the districts don't line up, if we need changes, that's a process that can happen and probably should happen, independently of the comp plan. Implementing the comp plan, might be a point at which we make other changes to the land use maps, and it could be part of that, or, we could initiate something separately if it's something that should be changed.
Well, it raises the issue about, in the village district, whether you can have residential uses in the village district and commercial uses side by side, which I don't know if that's what we want. Or whether we want some sort of village district that's commercial retail in a village district that's, well, I guess it would be more residential. I guess that is village residential in a way.
The plan, the proposed future land use map talks about residential growth areas, but doesn't talk about like commercial growth areas. Is there a reason? Is there a reason for that? Maybe I'm not understanding what the purpose of the map is, but seems like it would want to sort of focus the commercial development more than the residential.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I noticed about this draft. And again, this draft isn't reflective of, the collective thinking of the committee. It's mostly reflective of the thoughts of the KV cog planner and what she thought was appropriate to put in here as a starting point. But one of the things that I identified was that I was uncomfortable with the way the discussion of growth concerning residential and commercial was all kind of blended together.
Yeah.
It didn't distinguish, and residential and commercial growth are obviously two completely different things. So I think that needs to be, picked apart and addressed more specifically.
And I think, at least for me, I think that what I was seeing in both our existing comprehensive plan and this one is that the village districts are essentially mixed use traditional New England villages. It's a mixture of commercial and residential uses. When you get outside and when you get outside of those areas, the village residential is more focused on residential specifically, as opposed to that commercial component. So it really was tying in most of the commercial development into the village districts. The takeaway that I have on that is, where was I going with that? I'm sorry, I'll get there in a second. I'm around the barn and I've lost myself halfway around.
One of the things that was addressed specifically in the old plan to accommodate commercial development, because that was one of the things that was raised several times in that process, that, we need to accommodate commercial development. And the way in which it was done was to expand the village districts. Those were stretched out a little bit in the center of Readfield and in the depot. Specifically to accommodate potential commercial development.
And I think I know where I was going with that. The other thing I think that was the comp plan committee has talked about it on a number of occasions is that while Readfield can expect some commercial development, it's unlikely to experience a substantial amount of commercial development. You've got some marijuana shops going in.
They'll go out.
What's that?
And they'll go out.
I don't know. I'm not so sure.
Right.
There's a lot of popularity there. And you've got a couple of corner stores, perhaps a few restaurants. I think the bigger risk in a place like Readfield is sort of the little onesie twosie small commercial development that might occur along the highway if you allow it, along 17, especially as you run through the community, if you don't limit it to the village areas.
Yeah, and one thing that was done very specifically and consciously in the old plan was to make sure that those main routes like 17 were primarily zoned village, rural residential that would preclude that kind of development.
And Chip just leaned into me and he nailed one of the more popular commercial developments that's occurring right now across sort of the rural landscape is, self-storage units. That's the sort of thing that I think a community like Readfield, if we want to maintain that rural character that Henry was talking about, is something that we probably ought to be cognizant of, and how do we deal with those things? Where should they go if they're going to happen in a place like Readfield? Because they're cheap to put up, they're super profitable, and places like Readfield, you could certainly see more of those sorts of things going up.
And that might be another place where the designation of a rural resource district would be useful.
Yeah.
I mean, in part, you could use that concept to address them.
So what do we have to do with this chapter? Like, I mean, I feel like it's somebody. I agree with Don. It seems a little bit boilerplate, and
yeah, it is, and
feels like it leads a lot of work and massaging, and
it absolutely. So the plan was that, Matt and I have kind of been designated the coordinators for this chapter. And
Thanks.
So the plan was to pull together comments that came from this meeting, from the planning board, and bring those back for discussion to the full comprehensive plan committee. And I'd certainly encourage all of you to, if you have an interest in continuing to work on this, and if you want to take a look at it, if you have specific ideas about wording or concepts to be included that we haven't talked about tonight, or if you have more detail than what we discussed tonight, I'd certainly encourage you to continue with that and send it along. It would be incredibly helpful. I mean, the more ideas and the more support, the better. And but I think the next step for Matt and I will be to bring the ideas back to the committee and see what kind of discussion there is there, and if there is any coalescing of thought around any of these. And I'm sure there will be, because there are some good thoughts, and I think things that definitely will get carried forward into the plan. I don't know, Matt, and I don't know if you do. I'm assuming that KB Cog is going to continue to take a lead role on drafting, but probably with the inclusion of pieces that we feed to her through the process. What's your understanding of how that's supposed to go?
My expectation is that certainly she'll provide some assistance. Jess will provide some assistance on some additional writing, but I think that what she's provided us with is essentially the structure of the chapter, and is she's given us the empty Christmas tree and is allowing us to hang our own ornaments. That's
I would have liked a few ornaments myself to start, but
but that's, I think, is essentially what she's provided us with. She's provided us with something that we need to sharpen our pencil and add some of Readfield's own ideas into. You're right. Everybody who said this looks kind of boilerplate. It is. It's very boilerplate. It's definitely very much a starting point. So I agree with what Paula has said. Any ideas that you might have beyond what we've talked about this evening, anything that you think might be useful to include for discussion, I'm certainly open to continuing to hear feedback from anyone in the community, but especially a group of individuals who spend all of their time dealing with these things month after month after month, year after year. Paul, I can't believe how long you've been on the planning board, that sort of thing.
yeah. Thanks for that, Matt.
I mean, that's it, someone who's got that depth of experience, someone who's been involved that long, and many of you have. Jack was on the board when I was on the board, for goodness sake. Have Bill was too, I believe, when I started. That's valuable experience. So I really am interested in hearing what you think has worked over the years, hasn't worked, where your concerns are, changes that you've seen in the community that you think are good, changes that you think are bad. And those are the types of things that if we understand what you think has worked well or hasn't worked well, or has contributed to the character that you think is important or has not, that we can at least try to focus our conversation at the comprehensive planning committee level on. This is the things that we've heard are important. These are the specific problems that have occurred over the years, and these, we need to make sure that we figure out how to address these specific issues, because these are the ones that are important to Readfield.
How often does the committee still meet monthly?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a fear that might pick up a bit, because the effort in general for a whole host of reasons is behind the schedule that was originally set. So I'm thinking that there might be some thought about, picking up the meeting schedule a bit to move it through a little more quickly.
Are they drafting the maps and things? Is KV Cog going to do all that?
Maybe Cog is, yes.
So for example, if we were to, is it important that we give some, say we wanted to give some thought to the rural resource protection sort of thought process? Is there some criteria we should be sort of trying to establish to provide guidance to them on that, or how would we accomplish something like that in say a few months?
Yeah.
Or whatever we have left. I don't know how much time's left. 6 months.
Well, we don't know how much time is left either, because I think there's going to be some continuing discussion about whether or not the plan will make it to the town meeting, or if it's going to get pushed off until like November of this year. I know that.
I think November is far more likely.
Yeah, Eric really was focused on trying to get it to the regular town meeting, but the way things are right now, as Matt just said, I don't know if that's going to be possible or not. And the example that you just used, Henry, of the rural resource district and how would you map that and what are the criteria? I don't think we're there yet, because we haven't really had that full discussion conceptually in the committee. So I think that would be the next piece, that we would take that concept, talk about it, get some agreement around it on how to proceed with it and how to flesh it out. And then following that, a refinement would be, how do you map it? But you have to have all of those criteria in place, obviously, before you can identify how it's going to be mapped and so forth. So I think it's still a little bit early for that mapping piece. And we're still early in the process of getting the concepts out on the table and getting those developed and getting some consensus around those ideas.
I would just say, the land use map and the future land, those are probably the most looked at pieces of a comp plan. That's where people always open those up and look at them.
Where people's attention is drawn.
That's where the attention is. So we need to make sure there's enough time to actually QC it and do it correctly.
Yeah, I agree.
So provide comment beyond this, provide more comment.
It would absolutely be welcomed if you think about this further and you have detail or even, proposed language that you think you would like to put forward for consideration. I think all of the above would be really welcome in this effort. If you thought it was useful, I don't know if it will be or not, but at some point we could put the comp plan back on the agenda, possibly after some discussion by the full committee, to see where things are headed. We could bring it back and it would be a bit more focused, I assume, at that point. And, that's an option too.
Sound good?
Okay, anything else for tonight? And we can certainly talk about it again in the future. And I think this has been really useful. And Chip, is that a hand or a stretch?
I gotta put a shout out to the board. In the past 2 weeks, or even more later than that, we had Wayne incorporate our solar ordinance into their ordinance. And in the past 2 weeks, I've had no less than a half a dozen communities, Fairfield just today, Friendship yesterday, calling to ask for copies of the document that you all created, the solar ordinance. And it seems to be that you have created something that the state of Maine salutes and are incorporating into their ordinances. So I think that should be a real point of pride for you. I know it is for me when they call and they ask for it. So congratulations on what you did there.
Well, I think we have, primarily, obviously, Henry to thank for that. He took on the brunt of that drafting, and I think there's agreement that he did a really good job with that. So thank you again, Henry, for your good
Oh,
work.
absolutely. It's interesting. They've the Farmland Trust also grabbed onto it, and that's also gone to a couple of the COGs in southern Maine and the Androscoggin Council of Androscoggin, sorry, I can't even speak tonight, Council of Governments, and they've many communities have seen it now. It's getting a lot of press through those COG organizations. So nothing to do with us. They just sort of picked it up and have decided that that's one interesting component. So it's good. I'm glad it's providing use to others, and it can can always be improved, but it's better that it's a balanced approach to land use. So that's the good part of it.
I will also say, I want to say thank you to the board members on the planning board as well. I have an opportunity to work with the same municipal attorneys that you folks do. And one of the side conversations, I've already mentioned this to Paul, one of the side conversations I had with the attorney you work with on a fairly regular basis, I work with on occasion, Kristen Collins. She has very high praise for Readfield Planning Board with respect to shoreline zoning issues. And I think that is makes me happy as a resident to know that there's such a conscientious group of people on the planning board. She described Readfield's planning board as being one of the best she's ever worked with respect to shoreline zoning, and that's high praise from Kristen. So congratulations and good job, and I appreciate it as a resident.
Some people don't share that feeling.
I understand that. Sometimes being good at something people don't like.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
So the one thing we have remaining, we have one set of minutes. I think we can do them quickly if you want to get them off the table here. They're the minutes from December 13th. And I'm going to be abstaining on the vote, but I did have I had one thing about the language that I wanted to put out there. There is a paragraph on the second page that begins "Dawn mentioned," and this is about the Roy application, and it says Dawn mentioned that accessory dwelling unit expansion is prohibited, and I assume that what you were talking about, Don, was accessory structure expansion, not dwelling units. We weren't talking about a dwelling unit.
Yeah, I would agree with that as
Yeah.
a clarification.
So dwelling unit should be deleted and structure inserted there. So
Thank
are
you,
there
Paula.
any other comments on the minutes? Jack had proposed a few changes already, so you should have those. I think Angelica's draft that she sent around had Jack's changes. Anything else? Okay. So is there a motion on these?
Yeah, I'll move that we accept the minutes as revised.
I'll second it.
And Jack seconds. Further discussion? I'll call for a vote. Dawn,
Yes.
Jan,
Yes,
Jack,
Yes,
Henry,
Abstain. I wasn't at the meeting.
Bill,
I have to abstain.
George,
Yes.
and Paula abstains. I was not at this meeting either. So that is it. Thank you all very much. And oh, go ahead. You got something?
Sorry, I hate to keep people. Jack, I saw your email about Sincartha, and I'll respond to you. I just wanted to acknowledge that. And then also, Paula, I had a question about whatever the outcome was about the meeting format and things like that. Perhaps you addressed this at a previous meeting, but I think you and I were not at the same meeting, so therefore I probably not.
The
So
outcome of
there was
what?
some discussion about in-person meeting versus.
Oh.
Was there a follow-up from that, or did you go? I was just
No,
wondering.
there really isn't. What happened was that I went to the select board and presented the planning board's perspective and discussed that with them. There wasn't a decision made. I mean, there wasn't a specific question on the table to be answered. But I really felt like they needed to hear more clearly what the collective perspective of the planning board was on, in-person versus remote meetings. So I tried to provide that and be accurate and true to what I heard from all of you. And there are some members of the planning board that feel very strongly about in-person meetings. And but I think in general, the position that they've taken is that they encourage participation in person. But they appreciate and accept the individual choices that individual planning board members make for their own reasons. I think that's the only way I can express it. So, again, it's very clear that, as a body, the select board is encouraging every board and commission to meet in person if possible. But one of the points that I raised was that since we have been able to meet remotely, we've been more successful much more frequently in actually getting a quorum for the meetings than previously. It allows people, with busy schedules, an option and some flexibility that we wouldn't otherwise have. And I think a lot of select board members, acknowledge that and appreciated it. So.
Great.
So I don't think there's anything, further that we need to do about that at this point. We need to acknowledge that their preference is in-person meetings and they encourage that. But as I understand it, the choice is still with individual members for their own reasons. If we're going to be participating remotely, and as we discussed before, I think we all have our own personal reasons, individual reasons for participating in the ways that we do. So.
That's great. Thank you. I just wanted to see what the follow-up was. It is as I expected it to be, but I just wanted it to be clarified because could have been the other way. So I just wanted to sort of hear it. Thanks. Thanks for representing us.
Well,
so stoically.
Yes, that's great.
Well, I hope I did it appropriately and accurately.
Well, we're still here,
God knows I
so that's
tried.
good. I think we're still here, so that's a good sign, right?
You still got a
I watched
quorum.
it, Paula, and
Still got a quorum, right?
I thought you did great. And I also wanted to point out that at the end of your presentation, the select board ultimately, I believe, voted to formally thank us for our service. So
yes, and that was as I recall, a 4-1 vote. Yes.
yes.
Wow. I should watch the video.
You really should.
I can't even watch the news. I don't have time to watch those kinds of videos.
I watched Paula being a rock star. It was great.
It's true. It's true.
Okay.
Okay, I guess that is it. Thanks, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Matt, for joining us. Very helpful.
Yeah.
I'll see you at the
Thanks, Matt.
comp
Very
plan meeting
helpful.
next week.
Thanks, Matt. Bye, all.
Appreciate it.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Bye, Chip.
Good night. Good night, Mrs. Kelly.
All right.
How far away do you live, Sarah?
What's that? How far away do you live? How far do you have to go?
Down towards the shores.
Ah, okay.
I live next door, not next door, about 4 houses away from the Roy.
From the Roy's,